The cold wind swept down the busy city street, rattling old newspapers across the sidewalk. An old man, dressed in tattered clothes and with a scruffy beard, sat hunched on a bench outside a bustling cafe. Passers-by barely gave him a glance, some with pity, most with indifference. But this old man wasn't who he seemed. His name was Charles Whitmore, a wealthy businessman who had built his empire with sweat, vision, and integrity. And today, disguised as a homeless man, he wasn't testing the world. He was testing his only son, Daniel, the heir to everything he had. Charles's heart ached as he watched people hurry by, but nothing hurt more than the reason behind his disguise. Daniel had grown up in comfort, shielded from struggle, and in recent years, Charles feared that his son had become cold, entitled, and blind to suffering. So he devised a plan. He would pretend to be homeless and see with his own eyes whether Daniel had inherited not just his wealth, but his compassion. The moment came faster than expected. A sleek black car pulled up across the street. Out stepped Daniel, dressed in a tailored suit, phone pressed against his ear, his stride sharp with confidence. He looked every bit the young businessman Charles had trained him to be. The old man's heart pounded. Would his son recognize him? Would he even care enough to notice? Charles lowered his head, stretched out a trembling hand, and whispered hoarsely, "Spare some change, sir. Anything to eat tonight." Daniel stopped. For a brief moment, he stared at the old man, his expression unreadable. Charles dared to hope. Maybe, just maybe, he would kneel down, offer kindness, or at least a word of comfort. But Daniel's lips curled, not in compassion, but in disgust. "You people?" Daniel muttered, his voice low but sharp, always looking for handouts. "Why don't you work like the rest of us?" He pulled out his wallet, flicked a single dollar onto the ground, and walked away without another glance. Charles felt his chest tighten. That dollar, tossed like garbage at his feet, cut deeper than any blade. His disguise hadn't fooled his son. Daniel had looked straight at him. He knew it was his father. And still he walked away. For a long time, Charles sat frozen, unable to breathe, as the world blurred around him. He had tested his son, but he hadn't expected this answer. Not cruelty from strangers, that he could forgive. But indifference from his own flesh and blood, that was unbearable. Just as his heart sank to its lowest, something unexpected happened. A young waitress from the cafe across the street approached, holding a steaming cup of coffee and a sandwich wrapped in paper. She knelt beside him and said softly, "Sir, you look like you haven't eaten. Please, take this. Don't worry about paying." Tears stung Charles's eyes. This woman, who had never seen him before, showed more compassion in a moment than his own son had in a lifetime. He whispered a broken, "Thank you," as she smiled and returned to work. Later that evening, Charles returned home, shed his disguise, and sat alone in his grand study. The walls were lined with portraits of ancestors, men and women who had built the Whitmore name on hard work and honor. For the first time, Charles wondered if his legacy would end with him. His fortune, his empire, his name. What good were they if the heir to it all had no heart? But even in his heartbreak, the kindness of that young waitress lingered like a spark in the darkness. It reminded him that humanity still existed, even if not where he had expected to find it.